was elbow-deep in a broken heating unit on the third floor of a century-old building on Granville Island when the site manager called up the stairs and said someone was asking for me at the front. I figured it was the inspector. The boiler permit had been sitting with the city for 3 weeks, and I had started leaving passive-aggressive voicemails with the permit office every Thursday morning. I wiped my hands on a rag, tucked it into my back pocket, and headed down. It was not the inspector. A woman stood just inside the doorway in a charcoal wool coat, the kind that cost more than a month of my rent. She was maybe mid-40s, not trying to look younger than she was, which told me she did not need to. Her hair was pulled back. She carried a leather portfolio tucked under one arm, like it was a weapon she had already decided to use. Behind her, through the glass door, I could see a black car idling at the curb with the hazard lights on. She looked at the scaffolding, the plastic sheeting, the extension cords running up the stairwell, and the general controlled chaos of a restoration in progress. She did not look bothered. She looked like she was deciding something. "Are you Owen Shepherd?" she asked. "Depends on the answer to my next question," I said. She looked at me. "Which is?" "Did the permit office send you?" Something crossed her face. Not quite a smile. "No." "Then yes, I'm Owen Shepherd." She held out her hand. "Vivienne Calloway." I knew that name. Calloway Hospitality had been operating out of Vancouver since before I was born. Hotels, historic inns, a few lodge properties up in Whistler and Tofino. The kind of company that showed up in the business section of the Vancouver Sun whenever they acquired something old and turned it back into something worth staying in. My father had done trim work in one of their downtown properties 20 years ago. He had told me about the crown molding in the lobby like it was a church he had been allowed inside. I wiped my hand once more on the rag before shaking hers. She did not flinch. "What can I do for Calloway Hospitality?" I asked. She tilted her head slightly. "I need a husband, by Monday." I heard one of my guys, Theo, drop something in the stairwell above us. I did not look up. "I do mechanical and structural restoration," I said, "not whatever that is." "I know exactly what you do." She held the portfolio tighter. "That is why I am here." She told me then. Not all of it, not the way you tell someone you trust, more the way you tell a contractor the bare minimum so they can give you a quote. Her grandfather had built Calloway Hospitality from a single inn in Victoria into a company that now held 11 properties across British Columbia. He had died 8 months ago. His estate trust contained a control clause, a piece of old-fashioned thinking her grandfather had insisted on keeping in. That said, if Vivienne was not married before the first annual board review following his death, provisional voting authority over the company passed to her brother, Elliot. The first annual board review was Monday at 9 in the morning. "Elliot wants to sell," she said. Her voice was level, but her jaw was tight. 3 of the properties are heritage designated: the Carrington in Victoria, the Harbor Reach here in Vancouver, the Ridgeback Lodge in Tofino. He has a buyer, a hotel group out of Calgary that specializes in acquiring heritage properties, gutting the interiors down to the studs, and rebranding them as boutique wellness retreats. I knew what that meant. It meant the old wood came out. It meant the original windows got replaced with something triple pane and characterless. It meant the tin ceilings and the Douglas fir floors and the hand-laid tile in the lobbies ended up in a skip behind the building. "And me?" I asked. Vivienne looked past me for a moment, toward the staircase, where the original oak banister ran up 3 floors with a slight bow in the rail that had been there since 1923. Then she looked back at me. 14 months ago, Elliot approached your company about purchasing this building. He wanted to acquire it through a number corporation before the heritage application went through. I went still. That was him. Yes. We had rejected that offer. The building had been in my partner Theo's family for 2 generations. Theo's grandfather had bought it when it was a cannery warehouse and spent 30 years turning it into a working space. When the number company came with an offer that was too clean and too high, Theo had called me and said it felt wrong. We had turned it down without knowing who was behind it. "You did your homework," I said. "I needed someone who couldn't be purchased," she said. "You've already proved that." I looked at her for a long moment. She looked back without looking away. "What do I get?" I asked. "Legal protection, full contractual agreement, independent counsel of your choosing, no claim on your business or your assets, clean dissolution pathway with a set timeline." That's not what I asked. She paused. What did you ask? I asked what I get, not what you can guarantee I won't lose. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, the properties stay intact. The Carrington, the Harbor Reach, the Ridgeback. If we get through Monday and I keep the vote, those buildings do not get gutted. The heritage designations hold. The restoration work continues. I looked at the banister on the staircase, 100-year-old piece of timber that had never been replaced because someone kept paying attention to it. One condition, I said. She waited. Before the courthouse, you come here, to this building. You meet the people this affects, not a tour. You actually stand here and let this be real. Something shifted behind her eyes. All right. Not all right like it's a box you're ticking. All right like you mean it. She looked at the banister again, then at me. All right, Owen. I went back up the stairs to finish the heating unit. Theo was standing on the second-floor landing, pretending to check a measurement. Don't, I said. I didn't say anything. You were about to. He looked at the front door, then at me. She's still standing there. I did not look. I know. The next morning, she came back. Not in the charcoal coat, in the dark wool sweater and flat boots, her portfolio under her arm, and a coffee from the place on Johnston Street that she had clearly stopped for without knowing if anyone here would want one. She had brought 4. Theo accepted his cup and looked at the name written on it in marker, which she had gotten right by asking at the door, and then looked at me sideways for the rest of the morning. She walked the building with me. I showed her what we were keeping and what we had already saved. The original cast iron radiators on the second floor that still worked, if you knew how to bleed the lines. The window frames that had been rebuilt using the same wood species as the originals because that mattered. Because different wood moves differently over a century and you do not mix them. The pressed tin ceiling in what had been the front office, which we were cleaning panel by panel because replacing it would have cost a third less and meant nothing. Careless restoration is just demolition with better lighting, I said at one point. Vivienne stopped walking. She looked at the ceiling, then at me. Say that again. Careless restoration is just demolition with better lighting. She wrote something in the margin of a page in her portfolio. I did not ask what. At one end of the building near the old loading doors that still opened onto the water, she stopped and stood there for a while without speaking. The inlet was gray and flat that morning. A heron was working the rocks near the seawall. The Carrington was where my grandmother used to take me when I was small, she said. She had a room she preferred on the 3rd floor, corner room, 2 windows. She said the light was different there in the morning. I stayed in that room last year when I was in Victoria for the heritage application. The light is still different. I did not say anything because it did not need anything said. On Friday, we were in a small office near Robson Street with a lawyer named Mr. Farquhar who spoke like he had been trained to disagree with people slowly and comprehensively. He walked me through the agreement page by page. Vivienne waited outside the glass partition and did not check her phone once in the 2 hours I was in there. I noticed that. Mr. Farquhar looked up at one point and said, "You understand this is unusual." "I work in unusual buildings," I said. "I've got a baseline." He looked at my hands. "You also understand that legal and genuine are not the same thing." "I'm aware of the difference." He was quiet for a moment. Then he went back to the document. Saturday morning, we were at the courthouse on Smythe Street. No flowers, no guests. The fluorescent lights in the hallway hummed at a frequency that made the whole thing feel more official than it deserved. Vivienne's lawyer stood near the window. Mr. Farquhar stood beside me. The commissioner looked over the paperwork and asked if we both understood the legal nature of what we were doing. "Yes," Vivienne said. I looked at the form in front of me and thought about the first time I had stood in a building that was being stripped wrong. I was 22, working for a contractor who had won a heritage restoration bid by undercutting every legitimate company in the province. He was pulling original fir floors in a 1910 building in Kitsilano and replacing them with laminate because it was faster. I had quit that job on a Thursday and started Shepherd Restoration with a borrowed truck and one other person the following Monday. "Yes," I said. Vivienne had not brought a ring. I had not either. And then at the last moment I had. My mother had left me her father's ring, a plain silver band worn thin from decades of work. I kept it in a small dish on my kitchen counter. I did not know why I had put it in my jacket pocket that morning. I told myself it was because we needed something and I had it. When I opened my hand and showed her, Vivienne looked at it for a long moment. "You don't have to use that," she said quietly. "I know." She picked it up with careful fingers. When she placed it on my hand, she was steady until the last second, and then she wasn't, and I felt the small tremor before she let go. I looked at her. She looked at the front of the room, but I had seen it. Monday morning, the boardroom at the Calloway hospitality offices on Hastings Street smelled like fresh coffee and old carpet, and the specific tension of people who know a vote is coming. Vivienne walked in first. I walked in beside her. Elliot Calloway was younger than I expected. Early 40s, good suit, the kind of easy confidence that comes from never having been told no by anyone who mattered. He looked at me the way people look at something that has been brought into a room that they do not recognize. "Vivienne," he said, "this is creative even for you." She placed the marriage certificate on the table. "The condition is satisfied." Elliot's smile did not move. "You married a tradesman." "Restoration contractor," I said. He looked at me for the first time as though I were a person. "I'm sorry?" "Restoration contractor," I said again. "If you're going to identify me by my work, use the full description." One of the older board members, a woman named Mrs. O'Coffer who had been on the Calloway board since before Elliot was born, made a small sound that might have been a cough. Elliot leaned back. "And what exactly did she offer you, Mr. Shepherd?" "Nothing that would interest you." "Money interests most people." "Then you must have a simple time understanding most people." Vivienne touched my arm under the table. I stopped. Elliot's lawyer laid out the challenge. The marriage was too sudden. The timing was suspicious. The intent was arguably to circumvent the spirit of the trust clause. Vivienne's lawyer laid out the documentation, the license, the independent counsel, the timeline, the filings. Mrs. O'Coffer read everything twice, set it down, and folded her hands on the table. The chair, a man named Mr. Peterson who had worked with Vivienne's grandfather for 30 years, looked at Elliot, and then at Vivienne, and then at the papers. "The condition as written has been satisfied," he said. Elliot's face stayed composed, but the room went a degree colder. "This isn't finished," he said. Vivienne looked at him. "The properties aren't for sale, Elliot." He buttoned his jacket and stood. He looked at me one last time on the way out. I looked back. Vivienne texted me 20 minutes later. The headline was already live on a local news site. "Calloway heiress's surprise courthouse marriage raises questions about trust clause validity," attributed to an unnamed family source. Her phone had started ringing before we got back to the elevator. She stood in the lobby with the phone in her hand, reading the article, her face very still. "Daniel," I said. She looked up. "Elliot." Same principle. I looked at the revolving door, through which 2 people with cameras had just appeared on the sidewalk outside. "You needed a husband by Monday," I said. She looked at me. "So come stay at my place until this settles." She looked at the cameras, then at me. "I have a condo, which someone just photographed from the street based on that article." She looked at the article again. Then she exhaled once, slowly, through her nose like a person releasing a decision they had been holding on to. "Fine," she said. She showed up at my house in East Vancouver at 8 that night with 2 suitcases, a garment bag, a laptop bag, and a tote full of what turned out to be legal documents, and a bottle of BC wine. My house was a narrow 2-story on a street where all the houses were narrow 2 stories, and the yards were exactly wide enough for a single raised garden bed and a recycling bin. She stood in the front hall and looked at the boot rack, the tool belt hanging on a peg, the stack of architectural salvage catalogs on the table by the door, and the general state of a house that had been lived in hard by one person for 7 years. "It's small," she said. I moved her suitcase to the side. "There it is." She looked at me. "I didn't mean that as a criticism." "You meant it as an observation." "Yes." "Most accurate observations about my house sound like criticisms," I said. "Guest room is upstairs on the right. Shower has a 2-minute hot water delay. The radiator in that room clicks at night, but it's not structural. Coffee maker needs the handle pressed down or the carafe drips." She looked at the stairs. "You know exactly what's wrong with your own house." "I live here," I said. "I just haven't gotten around to all of it yet." The first week was not quiet. Elliot had clearly given someone enough information to keep the story moving. The unnamed source kept providing updates. I started letting calls go to voicemail. Theo began answering the shop phone with, "Shepherd Restoration, no statement available," regardless of who was calling. Vivienne worked from my kitchen table in the mornings, phone and laptop and 3 separate notebooks spread out with a system I could not decode. At night, she packed everything into a neat stack and slid it to one end of the table so we could eat across from each other out of takeout containers. She slept in the guest room, I slept in my room. Nothing happened the way the comments section on that news article seemed to assume it would. What did happen was smaller. She learned the coffee maker needed the handle pressed and locked with a half turn to the right or it would leak grounds into the carafe. I learned she took her coffee straight until after 10 and then added an unreasonable amount of honey and pretended she had not. She started leaving her boots on the mat by the door instead of the front closet after the second day because I kept tripping over the closet door when it swung open into the hallway. I noticed she had lined them up evenly, heels together, like she had been trained to be orderly even when she was adapting to someone else's space. One night I came in late from the Granville Island site and found her standing on the desk chair in the guest room, leaning out the window with a flashlight. "What are you doing?" "There's a bird in the soffit." I looked at the window frame. The latch had a gap at the top where the wood had pulled slightly from years of seasonal movement. Easy for something small to get in. "Come down," I said. "I'll look." She stepped off the chair and I leaned out the window with the flashlight. There was a starling in the gap, sitting there with the calm of something that had decided this was its home now. "It's a starling," I said. "I know it's a starling. How do I get it out?" "You don't tonight." She settled. "Try in the morning, open the window, tap the frame, she'll go." Vivienne looked at the gap in the frame. "You should fix that." "I know." "You said that about the coffee maker too." "I said I knew what was wrong with the house. I didn't say I was fast." She looked at me with something that was almost but not quite a smile. "In the morning," she said. "In the morning." I fixed the window frame that weekend. She stood beside me while I worked and handed me tools with more confidence than accuracy. When I was done, she opened and closed the window 4 times. The starling had already left. The week after, I took her through the Harbor Reach for the first time. The building was on Water Street in Gastown, a 5-story brick warehouse conversion that Calloway Hospitality had been running as a Heritage Inn since 1991. The current state was not good. Deferred maintenance had caught up with the upper floors. The original cast iron window hardware had been replaced on 2 floors with something generic. Someone had painted over the original brick in the lobby sometime in the 90s. But the bones were there. I walked her through every floor. I showed her where the issues were and what kind of issues they were. The difference between cosmetic damage and structural neglect. The things that could be saved and the things that had already been lost. I did not soften any of it. "This transom," I said, pointing to a frame above a 3rd-floor doorway. "Someone painted it shut 20 years ago. The wood underneath is still original. You can feel where the paint has pulled slightly on the south side because the building moves differently there. That tells you the frame is still active, still doing its job. Careless person would rip it out. Careful person strips it, works the frame, gets it moving again." Vivienne stood close and looked at it. "My grandfather bought this building in 1987, she said. He bought it because he needed a Vancouver property and it was priced to move. He said he did not understand why people paid a premium for old buildings when new ones were easier." "Why did he keep it?" She was quiet for a moment. "Because the first winter after he bought it, the boiler failed during a cold snap. The original radiators in the guest rooms held residual heat for 18 hours before the rooms dropped. He said it was the first time he understood that old things had a kind of memory that new things did not." I looked at the radiator in the corner of the room. Original cast iron, probably 1920s, painted the same cream as the walls so many times it had lost some of its detail at the joints. "We can save most of this building," I said. She looked at me. "You haven't seen the basement." "Then show me the basement." The basement was bad, but not unfixable. Nothing is unfixable if someone is paying attention early enough. 3 weeks into the arrangement, Elliot forced an emergency review of the trust through a petition to the estate administrator. The claim was that the marriage did not constitute a genuine union and therefore did not satisfy the intent of the clause. The hearing was in a boardroom at a law office on Georgia Street. Elliot was there with his lawyer. Vivienne was there with hers. I showed up straight from a site visit in Strathcona. Clean work shirt, my father's ring on my hand. I had not taken it off since the courthouse. I told myself it was because cameras still occasionally appeared and it was easier to be consistent. Elliot's lawyer asked careful questions. How long had we known each other before the wedding? Where did we spend our time? Did we share finances? Did this constitute a genuine marriage or a legal convenience? Vivienne's back was straight the entire time. Then the lawyer looked at me and asked whether I considered this a real marriage. I leaned forward slightly. Here is what I know is real, I said. She knows which radiator in my house clicks on Wednesday nights because the water pressure on that line drops when the neighbor runs their dishwasher. I know she adds honey to her coffee after 10 in the morning and does not acknowledge it. She fixed a piece of Heritage hardware in the Harbor Reach herself last Tuesday because the contractor we had wasn't handling it right, and she had watched me do it once. I know that because she called me to confirm the method before she started and didn't tell me she'd done it until after. The room was quiet. I don't know what a genuine marriage looks like to you, I said to the lawyer. But I know what paying attention to someone looks like, and I've been paying attention. Mrs. Okafor was not in this room, but Vivienne's mainboard chair, Mr. Peterson, was. He had not looked at Elliot once during my answer. The petition was declined. Afterward, in the corridor outside the boardroom, Vivienne and I stood waiting for the elevator. Her lawyer had gone ahead. Elliot was still inside. She looked at the floor for a moment. You didn't have to make that sound real, she said. I didn't make it sound anything. She looked at me. There was no boardroom table between us, no lawyers, no clipboard with a legal pad, just a hallway with very clean floors and the sound of an elevator arriving somewhere above us. Owen, she said. Her voice was different, quieter, not the voice she used for boardrooms or lawyers or people she needed something from. I did not answer. She stepped toward me. One hand came up to my jacket, and she kissed me. It was not for Elliot. It was not for the petition. It was not for anything except that we were two people standing in a hallway and we had apparently been moving toward this since she had shown up at my job site in a charcoal coat and not flinched at the dust. When she pulled back, she looked slightly surprised at herself. We should get out of this hallway, I said. Agreed. In the truck on the way home, her shoulder was close to mine at every red light on Burrard. She did not take the car she usually took. When we got back to the house, she put her bags on the kitchen chair and stood there in a way that had nothing cautious in it. We should not rush this just because a commissioner on Smythe Street got there first, I said. She looked at me. I was hoping you would say something like that. Don't look relieved. I'm not relieved, she said. I'm just tired of things moving faster than I chose them to. So we did it the way that made sense to us. Slowly. She slept in the guest room for another few weeks. I still made coffee badly. She still corrected the wording on my client quotes and pretended she was doing me a favor rather than enjoying it. But things changed in the small ways that matter more than the large ones. When I came in late, she looked up from the kitchen table and then back at her work, but she no longer pretended she had not heard the door. When she was on a difficult call with the board lawyers, she would sometimes come find me in the workshop behind the house afterward and just stand there for a while, watching me work until whatever she had been carrying leveled out. One evening I was replacing a section of damaged threshold in the workshop doorway, and she sat on the step beside me and watched. She did not offer to hand me things. She just sat there with her knees pulled up, mug in both hands, and said, "Tell me what you're doing." So I told her what the wood was, why it had failed, what the replacement needed to match, what it meant to get it right versus getting it close enough. She listened the way she listened at the Harbor Reach, not politely, seriously. Why does it matter that it matches? She asked. Because in 30 years, someone will open that door and the threshold will speak the same language as the rest of the building, I said. If I use the wrong wood, it won't fail today. It'll fail slowly, in a way that's hard to trace. And by then, the person trying to fix it won't know why it's wrong, just that it is. She was quiet for a moment. That's how buildings fail, she said. That's how most things fail. She looked at the threshold, then at me. She did not say anything else, but I saw her take it somewhere. Elliot made 2 more attempts over the following month. Both moved less distance than the first. The board had seen enough to form its own picture. The heritage properties came off the potential sale list permanently when Vivienne secured a funding partnership with the Provincial Heritage Trust to support restoration work across 3 of the designated buildings. The Calloway properties were not going anywhere. On a Tuesday evening in late November, I came home to find Vivienne at the kitchen table with no laptop, no phone, no spread of legal documents. Just a single manila folder placed in the center of the table where the takeout containers usually went. She had changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a Shepherd restoration hoodie that she had borrowed from the hook by the workshop door sometime in October and had apparently decided was hers now. Her hair was down. Her expression was the one she wore when she had already worked through something several times and arrived somewhere she was not completely sure about. "What's that?" I asked. She pushed it toward me. I opened it. The first page said annulment agreement at the top in clean legal type. Below it, names and dates and the language of a clean and careful exit. I sat down across from her. "The trust condition has been satisfied," she said. "Elliot's challenges are exhausted. The board is stable and the properties are protected. You did what I asked, and more than I had any right to ask for." She kept her hands flat on the table. "I didn't want you to stay because this started as an obligation, and you're the kind of person who finishes what he starts. That's not a reason." I looked at the document. "You rehearsed that," I said. "A few times." "How many?" "More than I'll tell you." I turned to the second page. The terms were exactly what she had promised in the beginning. My company, my house, my workshop, my assets, all untouched. A clean pathway and a reasonable timeline. Gordon, her main lawyer, had done thorough work. I closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. Vivienne looked at it. "No," I said. She looked up. "No," I said again. "I don't want my table back the way it was before. I don't want the guest room to go back to being storage. I don't want to stop knowing how you take your coffee or where you left your boots or why the third-floor corner room at the Carrington has different morning light." I looked at my father's ring. I didn't keep this on because cameras might show up. I kept it on because it stopped feeling like a prop somewhere around the second week. Her eyes were very bright. "I was trying to be fair to you," she said. "I know. You were trying to give me a door marked exit and leave it open. That was generous." I left the folder on her side of the table. "I'm not walking through it." She exhaled slowly. Her hands finally relaxed on the table. "I don't want out either," she said. The folder sat there between us like something that had made its argument and lost. That was the night the arrangement ended, not in a boardroom, not in front of a commissioner. At a scratched kitchen table in East Vancouver with rain coming down on the back lane and a hoodie that had become hers without anyone deciding it. And 2 people who had started paying attention to each other in a building full of dust and old wood and shows, clearly and without a clause requiring it to keep going. We had a real wedding the following September in the restored lobby of the Harbor Reach. The transom above the main doorway had been freed and rehung by then, original wood intact, moving the way it was supposed to. The cast iron hardware was back. The painted brick in the lobby had been stripped down to the original face. Theo stood near the front and kept looking at the ceiling like he was doing a structural assessment, which was how I knew he was trying not to cry. Mr. Peterson sat in the 3rd row and nodded once when I caught his eye. Vivienne came in without the charcoal coat, without the portfolio, without the careful composure she had worn the first time she walked through a building that wasn't hers. She came in like someone who had decided where she belonged. When they asked about the ring, I used my grandfather's again. Nobody said we could take it off later. Afterward, we stood near the tall windows at the end of the lobby, while the light came through the glass the way it always had, and she leaned her head against my shoulder and said, "You know, I came to your building to find someone who couldn't be bought." "I remember," I said. She looked up at me. "I didn't expect to find someone worth keeping." Years later, when people asked how we met, I let her start. She always said the same thing. "I needed a husband by Monday," she'd say, "so I found the most inconvenient man in Vancouver." And then I told them the rest. I think about the folder a lot. The one Vivienne slid across the kitchen table with both hands flat, her voice steady, her eyes not quite. A clean exit, every term fair, every line written to protect me. She had done all of that for me, and then she handed it over and waited. That moment told me something I already knew about her but had not yet put into words. She was not a person who held on to things that did not want to stay. She had too much integrity for that, and integrity, I have learned, is not the loud kind of thing people announce. It shows up in the small decisions, the ones nobody is watching, the ones that cost you something. Offering me a real way out when she did not have to was the clearest thing she had ever said to me, and I answered by pushing the folder back. What happened between Vivienne and me was not luck. It was a series of choices made by two people who decided, slowly and without fanfare, to be honest with each other. She was honest about what she needed from the beginning, even when it made her look desperate. I was honest about what I was willing to risk, and later, about why I was not willing to stop. That honesty created something solid between us. The same way sound materials create a sound building. You do not get one without the other. I have been doing restoration work long enough to know that a building does not fail all at once. It fails because someone, somewhere, made a small compromise, used the wrong wood, painted over a problem instead of opening the wall. Decided close enough was good enough because the real fix took more time. The failure comes years later, and by then the original decision is invisible. What is visible is just damage with no clear cause. People are not so different. The small compromises we make about who we are and what we will accept, those do not announce themselves, they accumulate. And at some point, you look up and the person standing in your life is someone you chose by default rather than by decision. I did not want that. I do not think Vivienne did either. What I respect most about how we got here is that neither of us took the easy version of this. She could have found someone softer to ask. I could have walked away from the courthouse with a clean record and a good story. Instead, we both stayed in the harder version, the one where you actually have to show up and mean it, day after day, in a house with a leaky coffee maker and a window that sticks and a ceiling fan that clicks and all the unremarkable evidence of a real life being built. Vivienne taught me that being steady is not the same as being closed off. You can be disciplined and still let someone in. You can hold your ground on everything that matters and still leave room for something you did not plan. I think that is the work, not the dramatic moments, not the courthouse or the boardroom or the folder. The work is who you choose to be in the ordinary in-between, the way you show up on a Tuesday, whether you tell the truth when the truth is inconvenient, whether you stay when staying is still a choice and not yet a habit. We got married for the second time in the lobby of the Harbor Reach in a building we had both decided was worth saving. That felt about right.